Once you head to daily participation, click on resubmit, and a text box will open up and type in the 3 significant points from today's lesson. And you can see bureaucracy and how it's spelled up there. It's not the easiest word to spell for a lot of people. But that is referring to the government workforce. And we have lots of government employees, over 1 million at the federal level, but we also have millions more at the state and local level. And they include a lot of different people that we wouldn't necessarily think about, like policemen and teachers and FBI agents. So it includes all kinds of government employees. And we'd already mentioned the bureaucracy before when I talked about the system over time, how it's changed. It originally, of course, utilized the spoils system, which was through patronage. Whichever party won the presidency or the governorship or the town mayor, then that's basically the party that all the government employees would belong to. They'd fire the other ones, or they'd switch parties, and they'd hire loyalist friends and so on. And it did create an incredibly loyal workforce, but it also led to incredible incompetence, people that couldn't do their jobs, people that took bribes easily, and so on. And so eventually this system had to be gotten rid of. But of course, obviously, there's motivation for both parties to keep it, because both wanted to, of course, the next time their guy got elected, they wanted to use this system. And so it wasn't until the assassination of President Garfield that led to the legislation that would change government employment. And that would be called the Pendleton Act, named after George Pendleton of Congress. He and the president, Chester Arthur, would work together to come up with this civil service system that exists today. And the Pendleton Act hoped to create reform because this spoil system, like I said, littered all 3 levels of government. Obviously, this one would only impact the federal level, but it did help provide inspiration toward the states and many local governments to also eventually institute similar civil service reforms. Now, civil service aspects include some of the major characteristics. One is that it is merit-based. You are hired based upon your experience, your skills, and then you get promotions based upon your evaluations and the jobs that you perform, not based on who you know and what party you're connected to. So merit-based is an incredibly important aspect. Another one would be impartiality. One of the problems is that under the spoils system, you had a lot of yes men, people that just said, oh, whatever this politician is saying is good, and I'll go ahead and follow through with it. But now you have impartiality, so they're not going to favor one party or another. They're supposed to concentrate on their expertise and give the best facts possible in any type of situation. And so that's another major aspect of the civil service, that it is impartial. Merit-based and impartial are probably 2 of the most significant ones overall. There are some other ones. Specialization, they focus on specific skills. If you're hired with an EPA as an environmental scientist, that's probably what you're going to do, and you're going to specialize on that and become a better professional over time. So specialization would be another minor one. And then, of course, hierarchy. The fact that there are different levels of seniority, but also management, that everyone reports to someone else higher up above. And so you don't have an environmental scientist at the EPA that's friends with the president, so they're going to fudge reports. They report up through a system instead to try to shield lower-level employees from that type of interference or corruption. And then, of course, there's the way that we classify them into 2 different categories. There's classified employees and unclassified employees. Classified employees are detached from the political apparatus of the system, and they also work within the general organization of government employees through a ranking system from GS1, I think, the whole way up to GS13 or something like that, similar to how the military has their people set up in enlisted or officer ranks. And as you go up through those numbers, you, of course, are promoted and you receive higher pay and so on. So the classified employees basically have this structured system that works in each and every government agency or department, unless that government agency is independent, and then they're known as unclassified employees. That particular government agency, if it's designated as independent, will have its own type of structure and ranking system set up, in particular because of maybe just the way that it works. For instance, there are actually it's either 2 or 3 uniformed civilian services. One would be the I can't even remember the name of it now. It's through the Department of Health. The Surgeon General's office is the one that leads it. But if you ever see the Surgeon General, he's not part of the military, but he wears a uniform. So they're one of the non-military uniform services, and so they have their own system of ranking and so on that they fall into. So that's generally known as unclassified. And then, speaking of independent agencies, they exist because they perform an important function that is necessary not to go through the hierarchy and report to either the president or one of the president's closest advisors. And so the Central Intelligence Agency is a good example of that. They gather information about other countries and what they're doing and whatever threats there are to the United States. So obviously they can't be reporting up through a bunch of different levels. They go directly to the Director of National Intelligence and the President to report any type of incidents they feel are exceptionally significant. So that would be an example of one of the independent agencies. The EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, is another example of that. And then lastly, I just want to mention government corporations. These are kind of odd entities that have also their own systems. They typically are set up kind of like a company almost, except they don't have stockholders. They have a board of directors that are appointed government officials. And the organization, instead of making a profit like a business, attempts to make money to put back into itself. So Amtrak, which is the country's basically sole surviving interstate railroad system, is an example of a government corporation. So money that you pay for tickets to ride Amtrak go back into Amtrak to help fund the system, its employees, its trains, its rail tracks, and so on. So that would be an example of a government corporation. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? Bless you. All right.